Here we're going to try and answer the question, why Scrum? To do so, we're going to get a little help from a very real-world software development project. We're going to turn to the Federal Bureau of Investigation here in the United States for a look at a notoriously ill-managed software product and how it was affected by Scrum. It all starts with the FBI Automated Case Support System, which was a system built for FBI agents in the mid-90s, and it used 1970s technologies like database and the natural programming language, and the result was that a lot of people thought it was a bad system before it ever even shipped. But it's what the FBI was able to ship at that time. This is basically, you can think of it as the CRM, customer relationship management system for criminals and crimes, right? They need a big database of all their criminals. So this is where they store their federal case if they ever make one. It became quickly apparent that the ACS system wasn't going to live up to the needs of a modern FBI force, and they needed a new system. Enter the Virtual Case File project. Virtual Case File was envisioned as a replacement for ACS that would take the ACS platform, upgrade it, put a new skin on it, just make it a nicer experience and more usable, and aggregate data across all of these disparate databases that the FBI had. True to form for any government office, the FBI went out and spec'd exactly what they wanted this software to do. They spent a lot of time doing this, and then went out to contractors and said, hey, we're not a software development company, so we're going to ask you to do this. So we'd like you to bid on doing this work for us. Ultimately, the Science Applications International Corporation won the bid to develop the project, although there were a lot of other vendors that did some small pieces of it. Now, when the project kicked off, the projection was that it would be done in 3 years for the cost of $380 million. So Virtual Case Files should have taken about that long and it cost about that much. Here's what actually happened. In 2001, coding started. Now, this was code being written by contractors, not FBI employees, although there was some project management going on back at the Hoover building where the FBI is headquartered. The project ran from 2001 to 2005, at which point it was determined that the project was so off track and things were so bad on this software development project they're going to throw away all of the artifacts they'd created thus far. Nothing is salvageable, they said. So the American taxpayer picked up that bill at a cost of $170 million. Now, it turns out that the FBI had gotten a new director back in 2001. In fact, Mr. Robert Mueller became the director of the FBI 5 days before the September 11th attacks. And with the fits and starts of the virtual case file system, Mr. Mueller had to go before Congress several times to ask for money to refund the virtual case file project. This was a notorious software project that was being monitored all over the world. It appeared in CIO magazine on the front cover. We all knew this was going on. And Mr. Mueller would have to go to Congress and say, this software project is still off the rails. And in fact, he had to do that 3 times. In January 2005, it was clear that we were not going to get any value out of this system. So Mr. Mueller's in the position of doing what so many other executives have to do with failed IT projects, and that is simply start over. So that's what he did. He went back to Congress, received approval for a new project. This one totally different because it's called FBI Sentinel instead of the virtual case file system. Totally different, right? And that means that what they were going to do clearly was go about creating the software differently. Well, not so much. In 2006, Lockheed Martin again won a contract to fulfill a bunch of specifications that the FBI had created. And this plan that Lockheed Martin now proposed called for 4 phases of deployment of this new system at a cost of $450 million over 6 years. Now, the big difference between the 2006 awarding of the contract to contractors versus the 2001 awarding of the contract to contractors was this. Mr. Mueller was really, really positive that this time a plan-driven waterfall type approach to the problem would work. Well, what actually happened is that by 2010, only 1.5 of the 4 phases had been done. Almost all of the money had been spent, and 2/3 of their time was gone. At this point, Outside firm named MITRE was asked to come in and perform an audit on the work that was happening on the Sentinel project. And here's what they found: that it would take another $351 million in 6 years to complete the project. So Mr. Mueller knew that he was going to have to go back to Congress and ask for money again. So we had this IT project in the early 2000s. That didn't work. And now we've got the same one, essentially, still running in the late 2000s. That's still not working. Give me some more money. It just really didn't add up. And he knew that this wasn't going to go well on Capitol Hill. So what did he do about it? Well, he went and he hired some people from the civilian sector. In other words, he went out to industry and he hired two agilists from Lehman Brothers, Jeff Johnson and Chad Fulghum. Chad Fulghum as CIO and Jeff Johnson as CTO on the Sentinel project. Well, what Mr. Johnson did after taking the reins of Sentinel was to cancel the outsourcing contract with vendors like Lockheed Martin and pull all development back to the FBI. So they went out and hired a development team. They built what they called a Scrum studio in the basement of the Hoover building, which really was a focused team room where software developers created the Sentinel program. What happened next stunned a lot of people. With only 40 developers instead of the original 400 that Lockheed Martin had on the project, the software was deemed complete in a little over a year, and only $30 million had been spent. Remember that the original budget was for $450 million. Finally, in May of 2012, the field tests passed, showing that, in fact, Sentinel was ready to go. They still couldn't go live, however, because they were waiting on proprietary hardware to ship. Finally, in August of 2012, Jeff Johnson did a public demonstration of Sentinel in production. A wee bit earlier than that, back in the spring of 2012, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, the two men credited with inventing Scrum, released a new book called Software in 30 Days. This book exhaustively details the FBI Sentinel project so that other companies might learn from activities that went on at the FBI. You can learn a lot more about this project simply by searching online for FBI Sentinel program. There are lots of articles and resources online. Just as MITRE had come in and done an audit earlier, in 2011, the Inspector General of the United States, which is an office that oversees regulatory compliance on other government offices, did another audit of work, this time focusing on the Sentinel program, with Scrum being used by the 40 developers at Hoover. The quote on this page was part of their report. This case study has obviously large implications. Here are some. Agile and Scrum are functional even within a plan-driven organization like a government agency. Also, that regulatory compliance, security, and all of those sorts of issues can be served appropriately by Scrum teams. Lastly, with Scrum, you're able to ship a lot sooner than you're able to ship in a plan-driven world.